All right. Welcome, viewers to Canada Files. We are fortunate enough to have Meryam Haddad, a candidate for the Green Party leadership, joining us. So, Meryam, can you tell us why you've decided to run for the position of the leader of the Green Party?
Okay, because, for many years, I felt that there was no point participating in politics, apart from voting, of course. I just realized that protesting and voting wasn't enough anymore, and the governments just deliberately kept themselves from taking the right decisions to keep my generation and the next from going extinct. They just did nothing. And the climate emergency is at the forefront. The inequality just got bigger and bigger. And the only way to lead a movement for change was through politics and by taking over the Green Party of Canada. The Green Party of Canada is it's small enough of a party to be taken over by the youth of this country. I feel like it could be our party. We could be fighting for our future. And the millennials and the Zoomers represent the biggest block of voters. So there's this opportunity to change not only the history of our party, but also the history of Canada. And I felt like that this is why I decided to run for the leadership.
All right, so that's great. So just to clarify something early on, so you've described yourself as an eco-socialist. But there's been figures sorry, you were going to say something?
Honestly, I represent myself as a socialist.
Could you maybe just take people a little bit through the differences between, say, in your opinion, social democrat and socialist? Because we've seen Bernie Sanders in 2020 basically call himself a socialist, but then push social democratic policies. So could you maybe explain that?
Well, for me, what does it mean to be socialism? It's every policy that we bring forward is the social justice is at the core. So it's at the core of everything. In my opinion, that we cannot reasonably fight climate change without everyone on board. For example, that if I give you the example of a single woman, single mother who's in rural Canada and who needs to work at Tim Hortons, let's just say that maybe she's on board to fight climate change, but she won't have necessarily she will be just completely focused on surviving with her kids, So ultimately, we all have a common goal, and it's about achieving this common goal together. I just feel like everybody is a socialist. It's not, I feel like some people don't know it yet, but everybody is a socialist. It's a common goal to fight climate change and inequalities.
Yeah, definitely. So on your campaign site, it mentions that you are provincially a member of Quebec Solidaire, which is a rather unique party in terms of provincial politics. So specifically in two elements, its proximity to social movements and how it has no party leader, rather it practices collective leadership. So how will your time as a member of Quebec Solidaire influence the direction that you take the Green Party in under your leadership?
Well, they are very progressive as a party. So for me, I joined them not very long ago either. You know what I mean? I've joined the Green Party of Canada last August to run for the federal campaign, and they have a very progressive platform. They were very inspiring during the past election in Quebec. They were able to go from 2 seats to 10 during the last election, provincial election, and I feel like and they are pretty much like I see the Green Party becoming a bit like the watchdog of the Parliament, like they are at the Assemblée nationale in Quebec. So this is how they inspire me.
Okay, that's great. So one of the newest resistance movements pushing for police abolition is the Afro-Indigenous Rising Collective, who are occupying Nathan Phillips Square in Toronto. So on the
Yes.
back of that, I want to ask if the Green Party, under your leadership, would seek to cultivate relationships with activist groups, and if so, how would you go about doing this?
Definitely, it's part of our platform. It's something possible within the constitution and the bylaws of the party to have them on the table, elaborating policies that will be voted by the members, of course. And they represent the communities that know what's the most important and what's the most needed. So it's they know what they need. You understand what I mean? So they need to be part of the decision taking, and not. And so it's possible to create some committees and to have them deciding and being basically be part of just a voice basically at the parliament and the policies of the Green Party. Yeah. So for sure, for us, it's important. And you know, if you look at it, in the past, we never had the NGOs supporting us, or we've never had, for example, the endorsement of NGOs during the past elections, even though our platform is the most progressive and with the climate strikers, for example, or environmentalist groups. It's because we never gave them a chance to be participating in our in the movement. And that's something I'd like to change with my leadership.
Yeah, so building on that, I was looking at the campaign site again. You mentioned the creation of regional associations. Now, the NDP and certain other parties do have riding associations. I'm wondering if you have plans on how they would be different to traditional riding associations and basically grant the people more power politically in the Green Party.
They are regional wings, specifically. So
Okay.
it's not regional associations. It's regional wings. We have one in Quebec that was implemented a few years ago, and it empowers the members that are locally based. Also, EDAs that are EDAs would work together and organize regionally that way. It will bring in new members. The members locally based will feel empowered, and it's going to be much easier also to run campaigns locally instead of having a centralized office in Ottawa.
Yeah, definitely. So obviously one of the biggest questions is as a leader, how are you going to plan to court disenchanted NDP and Liberal Party members to build a leftist Green Party?
We just got to be clear. We just got to be clear on what we stand for. I think it was not something that was achieved in the past. I think you know what the slogan was. We had a centrist slogan while having the most left-wing party. We just got to be clear about it instead of pretending that we are another centrist party. So I feel like by being honest to ourselves, being honest to the values that we have, we need to speak outside the bubble. Greens fall into the trap of talking to themselves, and we need to talk to the people. Because our policies would help people's lives, we just need to show them that, and we'll have them on board.
Yeah, so one of the questions, and now we've seen this looking at the Bernie Sanders and the Jeremy Corbyn campaigns. So leftist insurgent campaigns are going to face significant resistance from traditional media and the political establishment. So what are your thoughts on the media monopolies which dominate the Canadian media? Do you think they should be staying the way they are, or do you think there's room to break them up?
No, for sure. I'm completely against them, and I think it jeopardizes a lot our democracy. To Like I love smaller media outlets, like Ricochet, for example. Like it's something that probably like that. Like for example, they need to be funded more for sure. They need to be encouraged much more than they are at currently. And like. I feel like the Green Party and never really had the opportunity to be brought forward by like the monopoly of the media that they that like let's say just don't encourage or doesn't want to like that constantly go against us. Also, you have a lot of people that distrust the traditional media. I think with the younger generation also, they have a big distrust of media and politicians in general, of course. I think we also need to reinstate funding to CBC so that we have a really good federal production caster again. Yes, so I agree that it's problematic and it jeopardizes our democracy. For sure, like there are ways to maybe go around it. It's through social media. We can still manage to have a very inspiring campaigns with social media, which wasn't our best. We weren't good before, and it's something that I would like to bring forward, of course, with my leadership.
All right, that's great. So I want to shift to a bit more of a COVID-related topic now. So with CERB serving as an unofficial test run for universal basic income, what are your thoughts on this proposal? Do you think a permanent UBI should be instituted, or are there better solutions available?
Well, yes, I think there's we need to have something permanent. We need to have a UBI. It's more like a guaranteed livable income, but we need to make sure that that our social safety net is strong. It needs to be strong, and a way to keep it strong is to have a federal green jobs guarantee or federal jobs guarantee that come with a guaranteed livable income. This will help not only create jobs for, I'm talking about the transition here into a green economy, but the workers the fossil fuels workers will have jobs waiting for them, but also it creates a framework for employment in the private sector. There will be dignified working conditions. They are unionized jobs, and I think it's just going to make a framework that is solid for the private sector. So they won't be able to say, okay, we're going to lower the income because there is a guaranteed livable income for everybody. You understand what I mean? So that's a proper way to deal with it. Also, if we invested more in caring for each other, we would create strong jobs with great conditions. But as I said before, the guaranteed livable income should come hand in hand with a federal jobs guarantee.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a perfect chance to talk about federal funding. So COVID has pretty obviously exposed the importance of affordable public housing, given that pretty much everyone is forced to shelter in place. And as we both know, the Canadian housing market is absolutely unaffordable for most young Canadians. The Liberals have refused to invest serious capital into building or maintaining public housing. And so some have suggested even expropriating apartment complexes from landlords and large hotels from their owners, while more mainstream voices on the left advocate for increased funding to public housing. What are your thoughts on how the housing crisis could be solved in Canada?
For sure, we need to invest in public housing. So that's That's my opinion about it, and it was also it needs a huge amount of investment, and it's because like since the 70s, the governments have been encouraging people to purchase homes, right? These were the policies that were put forward. Affordable housing wasn't a solution for them, or public housing wasn't something they wanted to bring like forward. But the problem is now, just like you said, it's just too expensive to purchase homes. So now it's time to go back to public housing. And for sure, the governments need to invest in them. The gentrification is a huge issue too.
Yeah, so talking about basically housing, and one of the topics that comes up, the argument comes up, is basically the need for financial resources to cover that cost. So one of the biggest pushes recently is the push to force the rich and wealthy to pay their fair share. Now, the NDP proposed a 1% to 2% wealth tax in the 2019 election, which even that low amount was generated by the PBO to generate $70 billion over 10 years. Do you think this proposal is enough, or do you think more needs to be done to rein in the super rich who really exploit the Canadian working class?
We need to tax, yes. We need to tax more for sure. And there's a wealth. Also, just letting people become billionaires. It needs to stop. This is something that we need to figure out. The taxation. We need to reform the taxation system that we're in. Now, like concerning the numbers or the percentage that you gave me about the NDP, I wouldn't be able to tell you if it's enough or not. We might need to go even like further with the percentage. We need to close loopholes in tax havens. Also, corporations need to be taxed. I mean, why does Netflix not pay tax? So there are many ways to tax the richer. And yeah.
Yeah, okay. So talking about the super rich, let's talk about CUSMA, or NAFTA 2.0, which the Liberal government signed onto in 2019. Could you maybe talk about some of the false promises of free trade agreements and how the Green Party would approach the issue of basically globalization affecting workers more broadly?
For sure, it's globalization affects workers because things are not made locally. They are. We need to go back into localizing jobs and our economy. So it's. You're quite aware that globalization affects not only workers in Canada, but also, the environment. We gotta also this pandemic that we have it's due to globalization. It's due to capitalism. We need to stop consuming that much and producing excessively. So it's it's never good to have free trade agreements. Like even when we have free trade agreements, like the Trans-Pacific Partnership, for example. Like every time Canada signs an agreement for free trade, it gives rights to corporations and for example, Canadian mining to get richer in Africa and South America, where acts of imperialist violence happen. So it's also part of it's like a neo-colonialism disguised in a free trade agreement. So we're not for this, and the Green Party of Canada has always been clear about that.
Yeah, so you mentioned neo-colonialism and imperialism. That's a great transition to what I want to talk about next. So one of the biggest issues that alienates progressives from the various quote-unquote progressive political parties is really a lack of a just foreign policy, especially Canada's failed bid for a non-permanent UN Security Council seat. So I think you're well aware of Canada's imperialist foreign policy. And that is, it's really a disgrace. So the
Yes.
NDP even has also struggled on the sense of foreign policy being very weak on BDS, bar maybe a few decent MPs. So can you talk about what a just foreign policy would look like to you, and how would you achieve this?
And, like the fact that the past two governments, the Conservative and the Liberal, failed to win this seat on the Security Council, it's a clear message that we're just not the leader that we used to be. And I am ashamed, just like you, of the foreign policies of Canada. It's unacceptable that we're our biggest client for selling weapons is Saudi Arabia. Weapons that are built here and that are used to kill civilians in Yemen. Our failure to impose economical and diplomatic sanctions on Israel by not holding them accountable for their human rights abuse. I mean, by not expressing a position to Israel's annexations in the West Bank. Well, it's as if Canada has been an active participant. So it's things like that show that we are there are for sure that it's basically we do need to decolonize here, okay, but we need to decolonize everywhere on this planet. We shouldn't be Canada shouldn't be encouraging military coups just like the one that happened in Bolivia past November. Morales' indigenous government was democratically elected by indigenous people. So why are we getting involved in politics in foreign countries? It's basically an encroachment of sovereignty of these states, and which is a perfect example of what this culture of imperialism that we've been living in and colonialism. So yeah.
Yeah, so definitely an agreement there. Now, one of the things that obviously drives the colonial aspirations of the Canadian state is the corporations, especially mining companies. And
Yes.
that really power comes through lobbying mainly. Yes. So I'm wondering do you have any thoughts on lobbying? Now, one of the ideas that has been parlayed around in the past would be to actually ban paid lobbying and have it only be a volunteer opportunity to reduce incentives. Would you have any other ideas on there? Do you think lobbying still has a place in the parliamentary future, or do you think there's other ways that you could go about it?
Honestly, we do need to stop lobbying. First of all, the lobbying law is just not appropriate, and there are a lot of loopholes in it, so it's not properly managed in the first place. But lobbying is also protesting, there are corporations need to be banned from lobbying, but not NGOs, for example, or to bringing in policies like for a just transition, the ones that all the NGOs have been and community groups have been building up, or people. So it's about corporations and stopping corporations from actively taking all that space at the parliament and that have been running the policies of our country. At the end, it's governments have been taking decisions for them instead of taking decisions for us. So it's yeah.
Yeah.
Because
So talking about now, you mentioned decolonization earlier, and especially Indigenous rights. So I think it's pretty easy to tell Justin Trudeau's broken every promise around reconciliation and respecting Indigenous nations in any way.
Yeah.
Even like the NDP, we had an NDP premier in BC who basically actively allowed for the pipeline to be pushed through Wet'suwet'en territory. NDP MPs wouldn't name the BC government. Meanwhile, basically, Indigenous people make up 30% of the prison population in Canada, despite only making up 4.9% of the total population. So, as the leader of the Green Party, how will you push to have true reconciliation and decolonization with Indigenous people and make that an important part of the Green Party platform?
First of all, decolonization, it starts with defunding the RCMP, reinvesting in Indigenous communities, and working with Indigenous leaders to implement the Truth and Reconciliation Commission report, and also the report into missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. So this is what we need to bring forward.
Yeah, definitely. And so you've obviously made it clear that you're in favor of police abolition. So now, for people who maybe aren't as familiar, why is police abolition a better option than simply defunding the police?
Well, you know, at the end, it's I am for police abolition and prisons abolition, but it's a social project and like within the community, and it's a project that is constructed on the long term. It starts by defunding the RCMP and reinvesting in the communities, and it's about reimagining public safety. So I think defunding the police is just on the road to police abolition. Yeah, and like I'll talk specifically about the RCMP, okay? Because it's a federal it's a federal jurisdiction. So the RCMP was originally created to displace Indigenous people from their land, okay? And the RCMP have been continuing to carry violence against Indigenous people. You said it yourself. They represent the biggest percentages of people in prisons, right? As well as, you know, like the violence is carried out also against racialized and poor and mentally ill and marginalized people. So the RCMP is fundamentally brutal, and it's a punitive institution. They are the opposite of what the communities need. That communities that are increasingly struggling with health, poverty, and well-being. So the funding of the RCMP must stop, and the RCMP and all police must be disarmed and dismantled. So but it's on the long run, just like I said. And we need to increase funding in social services that allow these communities to become healthy and well. Services such as affordable housing and education and mental health services and universal pharmacare. And once we address all these roots issues and we dismantle the RCMP and the police, well, the crime rates and criminalization, they will decrease significantly. And it's just about reimagining, just like I said, the safety of our communities in a way that it's non-punitive and focused on rehabilitation. And you know, like it is what the scholars and activists, what they have been proposing. It's to defund the RCMP, and it's what the communities need to thrive.
Yeah, so you've mentioned about criminalization and how basically the government determines that, basically, and brought up a good point there. So one of the questions now that's been advocated for is the question of borders. Do you believe that basically, because you have basically immigration, there's a lot of punitive restrictions and punitive punishments, whether it's the US or even Canada signing on to the Safe Third Country Agreement, which is obviously laughable. Do you think basically that in an ideal society per se that we would have borders, or do you think that's maybe something that would hopefully eventually become a thing of the past? Honestly,
like there should not be borders for refugee claimants. And this, like, I can talk to you like from an immigration kind of perspective and somebody that is specialized in refugee claims. But the Safe Third Country Agreement it's a horrible thing for refugee claimants. And not only like this agreement currently is it's applicable, yes. When somebody crosses the border, like from a regular point of entry, the person cannot come and ask for asylum in Canada. It goes against the principle of non-refoulement, which is when somebody that needs protection, like permanent protection, comes into your land, you're supposed to let them ask for that protection. So it's not only possible now, but now even refugees that cross the irregular border, they're not able to claim asylum in Canada. It was implemented during the COVID-19 crisis, but at the same time, the Trudeau government mentioned that it's something that they have been negotiating with the US for a little while to keep people from crossing the borders to claim asylum, which is horrendous for the Liberal Party, who was elected in 2015 on a promise to be welcoming to refugees.
Yeah, and
so they're doing pretty much just like the Conservatives.
Yeah, I think we're pretty much, it's liberal light and conservative light. They're basically the exact same thing. So on a similar topic, basically, the George Floyd protests in America, and even in Toronto, more so, the Regis Korchinski-Paquette protests, have really brought the issue of systemic racism against Black people to the forefront in both countries. And there's obviously been very, very reasonable calls for the parties to confront systemic racism in Canada. So, as leader, how would you approach tackling systemic racism within Canada and also preventing that from happening in the Green Party, especially when one candidate tried to propose offering $20 to people who were stopped by police in a recent debate?
Honestly, racism is so rampant at the Green Party of Canada. And that's, I'm being honest there. We need to get young members to join us. The Green Party needs to be more firm when things like that happen. When members say such things also on social media, it should be just unacceptable. They should be banned, and their membership should be removed, revoked from them. It should be a zero tolerance towards discrimination and racism. And we need to be clearly progressive. This way we won't have these kinds of candidates or members just renewing their membership. So that candidate is still in the race. Also, no one has said anything to the two who said nothing after, nothing was said after he made that comment, even though the party took a certain resolution or oath to tackle discrimination and racism within the party. So I'm just waiting. I'm just waiting for them to react. And another thing that is very surprising is after that $20 comment happened, there were two other candidates that had the opportunity to say something, but they did not. And luckily, I had the opportunity to say something at the end because I was the one that spoke the less. I had that last minute of the debate. And it was up to me, the young woman of color, to make a comment. Not only the Green Party, but I think it's important for people that are privileged to defend people of color, Black people, and Indigenous people. It is significant for them also to take a stance on it. And it happened on national TV, so this is how rampant racism is. And now it's important to talk about racism, but it's important to act on it also in Canada.
Yeah, definitely. It's really crucial. Now, I want to just shift a little bit over to climate change. Now, basically, reports are saying that we have around 10 years before climate change becomes irreversible. And so the need to push forward a bold socioeconomic program to fight climate change has raised calls for the implementation of a Green New Deal,
Yes.
transition the economy to one emphasizing climate justice. Now,
Yes.
what are your thoughts about the Green New Deal?
It's part of my, it's something that my campaign wants to push forward. We want to build a Green New Deal. And they are bold ideas, just like you said. We will come up with bold ideas during the campaign. There are certain things actions that can be taken. It's an actionable plan, basically, that leaves no one behind, and you just need the political courage for it to happen. Decolonization and social justice is also at the core, like defunding the police can be also part of that plan. And it's about creating jobs also. A Green New Deal we will phase out from the fossil fuels, but and decarbonize our economy. But it will create a lot of jobs. It's a transition for workers. And the green jobs, the jobs for that transition. It's not only jobs that have to do with like retrofitting buildings and building new power grids and undo pipelines or decontamine soil and old sites and building new infrastructure, but it's also jobs caring for others. So working in childcare, working in mental health, working in long-term care. Of course, federal jobs guarantee would be part of it. A guaranteed livable income that we spoke about a bit earlier. And it's something that we need to act on it now. As I have said, it has been a problem. Climate change has been a problem since the 70s, and no one acted. No one has acted on it, and we're now in an emergency. So we just got to act right away if we want to give any kind of chance to our generation and the next from going extinct. So it's something that will help us tackle inequalities and tackle and act on the climate change. So
yeah, so I want to ask specifically on that. Obviously, there's kind of a debate on the future of the oil industry, which not in the sense of whether it should exist now in the future, but more on what to do with it. Some have advocated for nationalizing the oil industry, while others have advocated for a straightaway shutdown and an immediate shift to green jobs. Where do you stand on that front?
I'm for the second option. We need to shut it down and shift to green jobs. It would be a good idea to have also right away a cap on production. But as I said, like the proper ways to shut down and shift to green jobs. I am for nationalization. Don't get me wrong, but not the fossil fuels, not that industry.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so one of the biggest questions now, basically, with it being clear that the federal government can take on a bigger response, how will you push for stronger leadership by the government on both a just transition away from COVID and on the climate crisis front?
Well, we do have a perfect opportunity to do the transition right now, and we just have to, we have to do it. We have to transition into a green economy. A green New Deal would be good, and a just transition would be part of it for COVID-19, but also we need to act on climate change. So we just don't have any more time, and we need to work with the NDP and with the Bloc to pressure Trudeau to make change. The status quo is just not something acceptable. We saw it from COVID-19, how damaged our system is. And not only we saw that, but we saw that governments do make a difference. they can make choices and significant choices, and they were able to open to give a lot of money that saved our economy, right? Why not saving the planet? Why not saving our generation and the next? And another thing is, during the COVID-19 crisis, the government used green policies to save people. So we just need, during the next elections, the Greens need to win more seats. Like, we need to become more powerful and stronger in Ottawa. And so we really push forward what's important in the House. Imagine if we had green policies all the time. We need an inspirational young leader to win more seats. That's how I see it.
Yeah, so basically nearly the last question now. So there are other candidates that identify as running on a leftist or eco-socialist platform in this race. Well, I know you identify as a socialist. Dmitry Leskaris identifies as an eco-socialist, while Amina Kutner has identified themselves as socially to the left during the recent TVO debate. What sets you apart from them as a candidate?
I have a lot of respect for both of them. However, I feel that we need to be clear about what we stand for and be proudly socialists. Dimitri and I align on almost everything, but the fact of the matter is that Dimitri is another privileged white man in politics, and they are just overly represented in politics. So we need someone who can inspire young people to join the movement and vote. I'm 32. I am an immigrant. I am a woman of color. I am a lesbian and a socialist. And I've been a lawyer specialized in refugee claims of stateless Palestinians, Yemenis, Syrians, and queer folks. There's no one like me in politics. Just running for the leadership of the Green Party is an act of protest. And as a leader, I would symbolize the progress we want in Canada. This is the kind of leadership we want: fearless, courageous, and inspiring. This should be the identity of Canada. And I have dedicated my life to fight for social justice, and I have the political courage to stand up for all Canadians, especially the most marginalized ones. These are the people I have been representing. And I can also tell you that for me, failure was just never an option with someone with that many intersections, and so failure is just not an option in politics for me.
All right. So, sounds very exciting. So the question is now, how can people support your campaign if they're interested in doing that?
They need to join the Green Party of Canada. They need to become members and join my team. Join this movement and donate. And any donation can make a difference. It's just this opportunity we have. It's just, it has never been seen. We haven't been there. And I feel like this is the only opportunity that we have for young people to make our own party and to just fight for our future. It's just we're just at that right moment where we can change things, and we have this opportunity to shape our future.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for coming on, speaking to the